Our first reading this morning, and also text for Pastor Doug's sermon to come, is from James 1, verses 12 through 18. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desires he is dragged away and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. This is the word of the Lord. Would you please rise for the reading of our gospel, taken from Mark chapter 1, verses 9 through 15. At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. As Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw the heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." At once the Spirit sent him out into the desert. And he was in the desert 40 days, being tempted by Satan. He was with the wild animals, and the angels attended him. After John was put in prison, Jesus went into Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God. The time has come, he said. The kingdom of God is near. Repent and believe the good news. This is the gospel of the Lord. You may be seated.
Some of you might be familiar with the humorist Garrison Keillor, and he starts most of his talks with the language. He says, "Well, it's been a quiet week here at Lake Wobegon." And I thought, not so much. It has not been, for me at least, and probably for you, just a quiet week. It's been kind of a crazy week, for me anyway, and I bet for you. I was intrigued when I saw this sign. Jennifer Chavez sent it out to us as staff this week. It says, "Texans have got Lent covered. We've given up heat, water, showers, and groceries. We do things big here." Amen. It's been an interesting start to our Lenten journey. Somebody said that it felt like Lent started when the snow started falling, and I actually think there's something to that our season of identifying with the suffering of Christ was kind of foisted upon us, wasn't it? And the modern conveniences that we just take for granted, things like flipping a switch and the lights come on, maybe not. I'd just like to see the hands. How many of you lost electricity at any point in this past week? Yeah, the majority of people. So it was not uncommon for us. Lent began in an interesting way. I'm just going to do a shameless plug here real quick. Some of our members have written this Lenten devotion guide. There's a bunch of them in the track rack along the side wall in the narthex there. Martin Bodie wrote one for Ash Wednesday, and I just want to share a little bit of it with you. Martin is a member of our church here, and his parents lived in Minnesota, And he moved back there for a while to care for his ailing mother and his father, who was in a nursing home dying from lung cancer. And so he had some free time when he was there, and he started to work on his father's lathe in the garage. And so he turned out this bowl, and the very first thing that he ever made was an urn for his mother's ashes. And he said that in the moment in which he was placing the ashes into the bowl to be interned, he got some of them on his hands, and he was reminded of Ash Wednesday, from dust you have come, and to dust you will return. I thought that was a beautiful devotion, and similar devotions are written in there. So I really want to encourage you to take advantage of this Lenten season and the fine work that a number of our members have done in putting together this little devotional guide. I've been hugely blessed. You know, it's an interesting thing. We think life should work the way we expect it to. When we flip on light switches, the lights should come on, the heat should always be there, but Proverbs 14 says something rather different. It says, where there is no oxen, the manger is empty, but from the strength of an ox comes abundant harvests. Now, to us non-agrarian people, that may not make any sense at all. Let me break this down for you. If you got oxen, you got doo-doo in the building out there, right? That's what this guy is trying to say. That's what the author of the proverb is saying. Expect life to be messy. You can have a clean and sterile life if you want, but it won't be fruitful. And you should expect life to be messy. As a matter of fact, I went to a counselor one time, and he actually said these words to me. He said, "You're thinking life should always work. It's a miracle when it does work. We live in a broken planet, a broken creation, and don't take for granted things that work, relationships that work, light switches that work. The miracle is that they ever work at all." And that actually stuck with me. We should expect messes. If you've got oxen in the barn, you're going to have to clean stuff up. And we should just come to expect messes. That's part of living a fruitful life. I like the way that Eugene Peterson puts our text for consideration today. He says this. He says, don't let anyone under pressure. Let's just pause right there. Anyone under pressure. You know, I actually had not felt this way in the 3 years that I've been here at Grace. We've had some interesting and I'll just say twists in the road. I never really felt that much pressure, but this last week, for whatever reason, maybe it was because it was 32 in my house and I could see my breath constantly, but I felt pressure. And I was like, I'm in survival mode, and I felt just out of sorts. And maybe some of you felt that way also. See, under pressure is when sin starts to get a hold of us. It's when things are distorted and our thinking isn't clear that under pressure stuff happens. And he goes on to say this. He says, when you're under pressure, don't give in to the evil one saying, God is trying to trip me up. God is impervious to evil. He puts evil in no one's path. The temptation to give in to evil comes from us and us alone. See, when we're under pressure, we do things that we wouldn't normally do. And actually, I felt that this week. I think a lot of times that pressure actually turns toxic. And in the church, I think that can kind of come down to this idea of we're better. It's a very dangerous thing. Jesus had his strongest criticism for the better, for the Pharisees. And it's so easy for us church people to become modern-day Pharisees, not by intent, because we're trying to uphold the moral law of God. And what's the matter with those schmucks who don't? Right? Things work better when people don't steal stuff. Life just works better. At about 10:30 on Friday night, I got a call from the Arlington Police Department. Somebody had stolen a car in that apartment complex right up there, and they ran it into our school building. And so they called me, and they wanted me to get security footage off of the cameras, and so I got up there at 10:30 at night, and I realized I don't have any of the security codes to any of those cameras. I'm calling people between 11:30 and 1:30 at night. Do you have the security code? I called about 20 people. We never found the security. Guess what, though? Here's the point. Life works better when people obey the 10 Commandments. Do not steal. I had a lot of people kind of frustrated with me because I was calling them because the police had called me because some doofus tried to steal a car and ran into the building. Life works better when people obey God's moral laws. But it doesn't work better when people in the church say, oh, those people over there, they don't know what they're doing. That's just judgmental. So what do we do? Well, we try and avoid the better-thanness mistake because grace and compassion are what the world needs. If I had to boil it down, here's the main point that I'm really trying to make here. Sin shrinks God down, and it puffs us up. I just want you to think about that for a second. Sin shrinks God down, and it puffs us up. Lent is a season to get right-sized before the Almighty. One of the things that we're going to do on our Lenten series on Wednesday nights, I hope you'll join us, we're using a theme called Give It Up. And you know, a lot of times people say give stuff up for Lent, and it means, well, I'm not going to have chocolate, or I'm going to cut back on desserts, or whatever. That's fine. But we're going to be focusing on giving up attitudes or beliefs that really hinder our ability to see God for who He is. And the one that we were going to do this last Wednesday night was going to be give up your small view of God. And so I want to help you in thinking that through, so you don't shrink your God down, so you see Him for who He really is. That's a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. And see that little dot there where it says we are here? That's not just Earth. That's the entire solar system that we're a part of, with the sun at the middle and the planets orbiting around it. We're pretty insignificant, aren't we? I want you to think about this for a second. That's one galaxy that has billions of stars. Did you know that there are 2 trillion galaxies? Oh. And we're just that little dot. That's our whole solar system. That's who we think we are. But there are 2 trillion universes out there. Even within our own universe, we're not very big, to be real honest with you. Check this out. This is a planet called Musifi, or the Garnet Star many times. If you took an astronomy class, maybe you learned about the Garnet Star. It is 15,000 times the size of our sun. And that's only the 10th largest planet in our solar system, of which there are 2 trillion galaxies. Holy cow. Is this starting to blow your mind yet? Let me take this a little bit further. If the Earth were a golf ball, 2.7 quadrillion golf balls would fit inside Musifi. All right, so you know what a million is. A million is 1,000 times 1,000. A billion is 1,000 times a million. A trillion is 1,000 times a billion, and a quadrillion is 1,000 times a trillion. I had to stop and think there, right? So, if every one of those were taking let me do some mind stretcher here with you. That doesn't really blow your mind yet, I know, because it's just numbers. And anything beyond the like $17 I have in my pocket, it's just beyond my ability to think and do math. So let me put it this way. If you had 1 million seconds, 1 million seconds would take you back 12 years, right? 12 years. So how long do you think a billion seconds would take you back? I'm sorry, I said 12 years, I meant 12 days. 1 million seconds takes you back 12 days. 1 billion seconds takes you back to 1979. Okay? 1 trillion seconds takes you back to 30,000 BC. And 1 quadrillion seconds takes you back to 30 million years ago. We think, 12 days, that's 1 million. A quadrillion is 30 million years ago. There is a vast difference here. If Earth were a golf ball, 2.7 quadrillion golf balls would fit inside Musifi, and Musifi isn't even one of the largest, it's the 10th largest planet in our solar system, but let me blow your mind just a little bit here for a second. There's this planet called Canis Majoris. It means the big dog star, right? I love that, the big dog. Canis Majoris, if Earth were a golf ball, 7 quadrillion golf balls would fit inside of that. Here's what that means. You take the entire state of Texas, from up in the Panhandle all the way down to Brownsville, you go from El Paso over to Beaumont, every square inch of this state would be covered in golf balls to the knee high, 22 inches high. Everywhere that you drive today, there are golf balls. If Earth were the size of a golf ball, everywhere in the state of Texas, 22 inches deep, that would fit inside of that one planet, inside of this one galaxy, one of 2 trillion galaxies. Are you getting the point? God is big. And he went, and it just all came into being. With a whisper, God spoke, and all that is created was. He is powerful. He is mighty. He is above everything, and we shrink him down. He can't handle our heat. I didn't know ERCOT was a swear word until this week. Anybody either issue that word that way or see it that way? I did. Probably both. And I start to think I know best. I start to think I can do better. It's a broken, messy world. You're going to have oxen. You're going to have to clean up the dung. That's the reality. If you expect it to all go right, you're setting yourself up for a big heartache all along, and you're going to become a bitter person. That's all there is to it. But when you see this God who went, whoosh, and it was, and you start to drive around today, and I didn't tell you this, but just think about this for a second. On a typical golf ball, there's about 300 to 400 dimples. Texas is actually, the state of Texas is actually less than 1 dimple. And in this less than 1 dimple on a golf ball, there are almost 30 million people who live there, and God cares for every single one of them. It's mind-blowing. Wow. I don't know how we can't just go, whoa. We live in awe of God. With a whisper he spoke, and we're 1/300millionth of half of a dot on a dimple of a golf ball compared to the size of this largest planet that we know in our galaxy, of which we are one of 2 trillion galaxies. Does it hurt your brain yet? It kind of hurts mine, but it's important that we start to think about the magnificence of our God. And here's where we get into trouble. When tempted, we underestimate God and we overestimate ourselves. We should expect messy, but we expect perfection when it's in the other person, that is. If we only judged ourselves, even by our own standards that we judge other people, we would fall short, wouldn't we? That's why we criticize. We think we could do better than them. The reality is, like Ronan said, uh-oh. Right on cue. Some of you might remember the movie Schindler's List that was out, 20 years ago maybe. But the story was of this Schindler who was an industrialist, and he actually was manufacturing goods for the Nazis. But secretly, Schindler was using Polish Jews from the ghetto to fuel his factory, because he was trying to save these people, because he didn't really like what the Nazis were doing in exterminating them. And so in the movie, there's really kind of three groups of people. There's Schindler and a couple other people, his wife and a few others that were kind of the heroes. And then there's this vast group of victims, the Jews who were off to the Holocaust. And then kind of the anti-heroes of the entire story were the Germans. And if you were to identify with any of those groups of people in that movie, most of us would want to think of ourselves as Schindler. Or perhaps some of us might think of ourselves as the victims. But I doubt if any of us really says, oh yeah, I am the German stormtroopers. I'm capable of doing the atrocities that they did. But you know what? Most of them were church-going Lutherans. And they got bent out of shape by a culture that was weird and hardwired, and they did things they never thought they could do. They did atrocities that they never wanted to imagine themselves doing, and they got out of there, and they were crushed because they had done some ridiculously terrible things. Church-going family, guys. See, they tended to underestimate their ability to do evil, just like we do. We're all about an eyelash away from stupid. We are. Every one of us is about an eyelash away from committing some kind of stupid atrocity. We just are. You know why? Sin. And sin tells us, no, you're not that bad. And sin says, well, God's not that big. You can handle your problems. No. The Lenten season calls us to remember this. He shrunk down. The God of the universe who spoke 2 trillion galaxies into space, he shrunk down to our size. He became like us because he knew you couldn't dig yourself out of the problem that you've dealt yourself into, that you're about an eyelash away from doing really dumb things. And sometimes you do, because none of us perfectly follow the stuff that we're supposed to. And he shrunk down and he became like us. Not just like us, putting on human flesh, but he subjected himself to the very cross, that you and I might have life. And so as we journey this Lenten season, we journey to the cross of Christ that we remember on Good Friday, we're humbled. It's the title of our little devotion book. It says, bow down. Humble yourself. Come, let us bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. Let us see him for all the glory, the majesty that he really is. Let us see ourselves for what we really are. Very small. Less than one dimple on a golf ball in a state filled with 22 inches up to your knees. Everywhere that you're going to drive today, just think about that. Golf balls up to your knees. And you're less than a 1/30,000,000th of a dimple. We're really small. And there's a God who put it all into place, and he is for you. He said, I know those guys can't do it. They need a restoration that could come only through the blood of my Son. And so when we participate in his body and blood in just a minute, his presence is coming here. And it's changing us from the inside out. We know his love. He shrunk down and became our size to speak our language, to speak love, and to bring us new life. So part of our Lenten reflection is to get right-sized, to bow down before the Lord our Maker. As we do that, we want to remember, I love this verse, John 30:30. It's John the Baptist is the one speaking this word, and all of John's former followers, disciples, were going out to Jesus, and some of his disciples, John was in prison at this point, and some of his main followers come back and say, they're all going to follow Jesus. And John says, yep. I must become less, and he must become greater. He must become greater, I must become less. And isn't that our Lenten cry too? He must become greater, and I must become less. And he uses testing to do that. To get us to a place where we're broken of ourselves, to where we have to cry out to him. A.W. Tozer said it this way: God never uses anyone greatly until he tests them deeply. Some of you were deeply tested this last week. Some of you, if you weren't, you will be. That's just the way the world works. It's a broken world. Expect to have to muck the stalls. It's a messy world. May God be with you as you do that. It is a messy place. But he puts things back in order, and we can trust him. I'm going to invite you to pray with me. God, you spoke and it was. We're so small. We think of ourselves as big and able to handle things, but the reality is when light switches turn on, it's kind of miraculous that you've allowed us to figure out how you wired the thing, the universe. And Lord, as we advance in technologies, let us not think more of ourselves. Let us be humbled by the things that you have allowed our minds to figure out. It's all a gift from you. We thank you that you are making us. You are creating in us. You are shaping and forming us even in the midst of testing and trials. And Lord, we're humbled to be able to call out to you. Thank you for sending your Son, who became our sized, that we might have life with you. May we live these words in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to invite you to stand if you would, please. You know, something that you do all the time, it's like when I was a kid saying the words of the Pledge of Allegiance, sometimes you wouldn't even know what you're saying. But in the first line of the Apostles' Creed, I just want you to think today, well, what did we just talk about? I believe in God the Father, Creator. He spoke and it was. 2 trillion galaxies. Musifi. Think about it. Let's join. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. And the third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven and sits at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. From thence he will come to judge the living and the dead. And I believe in the Holy Spirit, the holy Christian church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. Please be seated.